Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. My name is Sigrid Philippard, and I'm the country director for the Norwegian Seafood Council in France. One of the most important pillars of activity in the Norwegian Seafood Council is market insight. That's why we've now taken a deep dive into the France seafood market in our new report. And with me today, I have David Marsden and Lars Moxnes, who are category insight and consumer behavior specialists. So stay tuned. David, please go ahead to open today's session.
Hello and welcome everybody to our webinar. We're really excited to introduce a webinar on the snapshot report, which feeds into the larger France seafood market report for 2025. And we're really excited and proud to introduce the report and this webinar. The report will be available, snapshot report will be available shortly on the portal for you all to see further information. So thank you very much for joining. Just to introduce myself first, my name's David Marsden. I'm a category and insight specialist working alongside the team at Norwegian Seafood Council in Norway. I have over 30 years in the trade, working across multiple markets globally. I'm based in the UK, but have done extensive work in markets like France and Italy, as well as the UK, working with most of the major retailers and buyers and insight specialists within those markets. So I'm delighted to join you today and hopefully take you through some interesting information about France. So in terms of what we're going to be talking about today, the agenda is as follows. So I'm going to take you through a few sort of setting the scene slides on the French economy and France and food in general. We'll talk a little bit about French consumers and what they're doing around food. We'll then focus in the fish and seafood market and drill into that market, and hopefully you'll get some really interesting stuff from that. We'll then move on to the French out-of-home market. So what are consumers doing in restaurants? I'm then going to hand over to our consumer insight expert, Lars, who's going to take you through some fantastic work around what he's been doing with Ipsos to understand French consumer behavior and further behavior on tracking consumers in France. And he will conclude by talking about where the opportunities lie for Norwegian producers. So without further ado, I'm going to move into the first slide. As discussed, hopefully you're going to get some really interesting stuff from this webinar today. And we're going to talk a little bit about France and food and seafood and really sort of introduce that passion that France and food is known about. It's synonymous in terms of cultural importance. In fact, in 2010, UNESCO chose France and French cuisine as a World Heritage point. And so it's really important. So how big is the market in France? So if we look at the fast moving consumer goods, or PGC FLS, that's a £134 billion market in 2024. And that's the sort of food and drink sales that goes through the major supermarkets. And that accounts for around 60% of total food and drink sales. The rest go through traditional stores like boulangerie and fishmongers and things like that, and also the online channel. What we do know in France is there's still economic uncertainty, and that there's a little bit of uncertainty around consumers. And what we're seeing is that French consumers are using things like e-commerce to manage their spend, and they're probably buying slightly less, and they're visiting more stores seeking value. We're also seeing that French consumers are eating more at home. French consumers love to cook, and we'll talk a bit about that, but they're going out probably slightly less than they did 5 years ago. And then finally, French seafood is so vital and such an integral part of French diets. The category, according to Kantar, is worth about 8.4 billion. And actually, seafood accounts for about a quarter of all household protein spend across all meats and fish. So I'm going to talk to you for the next few slides a little bit about what's going on in France generally, and I'm going to start off with the French economy. So you can see from the chart on the right, which came from the French government, that French debt is at the highest it's ever been. So that is a historical record of French public debt. And actually, the French government introduced a €50 billion budget in February to try to tackle this. Their target is to reduce the debt to 5.4% of GDP. What we also know that whilst inflation is okay at the moment and the housing market's starting to stabilize, consumer confidence is still a little bit weak, and that's because French consumers have seen this period of sustained pressure on pricing, on bills, and it's really hit them in the pocket. So we're seeing, and that's probably a trend we're seeing across Europe, but that is one of the key trends we're seeing in terms of the economy. France is the second largest economy in the European Union, and actually, in terms of the continent of Europe, it's the fourth largest economy. So it's a real powerhouse of Europe. And if we think about food, we talked about that synonymity with France and food. And actually, France is the leading exporter of beef in Europe. It has the third largest pig herd. It leads the world in the most famous sort of wines and spirits category that we all know and love of France. And also, we know that it produces a lot of seafood. So, for example, it's Europe's leading producer of oysters. We're going to move on and talk a little bit about French consumers now. So we know that French consumers are cooking more at home, and actually, they're cooking a lot of those, around 44%, according to Nielsen, are cooking meals from scratch at home. So taste and quality are really important to the French, and this is all about home cooking from scratch, and that's really important factor when French think about food and think about what they're purchasing. What we also know is that, particularly in younger French consumers, that the sort of mission of convenience is coming through in terms of the trends that we're seeing. So around about a quarter, or 24%, are looking for quick solutions, or part prepared products, or easy to prepare products, and this has grown by over 6 percentage points since 2019. And again, this is a trend we're seeing across Europe. We're seeing it in the UK, for instance. The French love to try new dishes. That's something that probably won't surprise anyone here. So when you're thinking about the products you're producing, you can introduce new cuisines, and the French will go with it if the quality is there. What we also know is that there's a desire for homemade from French consumers. This is something that Kantar highlighted in a recent survey, and it's something that there's an opportunity for the traditional stores to offer their consumers, their shoppers, if you can produce a product which is almost pre-prepared or prepared, that offers that real comfort homemade feel, that will appeal to French shoppers. But if we look at breakfast as a mission, in terms of a food mission, 70% of French consumers see it as the most important meal of the day. And that really governs what happens with other meals throughout the day. And what we're seeing is a blurring of traditional meal times, and we're seeing snacking as coming as one of those areas which is in growth because of that. So if people don't eat breakfast in France, they tend to snack more, and we do know that mid to late afternoon period between 4 and 6 p.m. is an area where a lot of French consumers snack, and we're seeing that health is also plays a part within that, and that's quite interesting to see. So think about that blurring of meal lines in terms of the French consumer. So how does that impact seafood? Well, according to Kantar, we know that this convenience trend is coming through in France. So, for example, one of the examples around that is sushi and surimi. We're seeing that has grown over the last sort of 5 or 6 years in France, particularly with young consumers, and we'll talk about that a little later. But we're also seeing the rise of the delicatessen in French supermarkets. That is becoming more prominent, and when you go to the major retailers, such as Carrefour or Auchan, those guys are looking at creating ranges that appeal to French consumers. So think seafood tapas, think tuna bites, salmon jerky, seafood spreads, those kinds of products, those kind of almost convenient products. Also smoked fish, and actually the likes of salmon has done very well, and also trout because of that. We also, a European trend that's particularly important in France is health. And 53%, according to Kantar usage data from last year, are committed to eating well, and health plays an important part of that. And yes, that does include traditional reductions in salt, fat, and sugar, but actually it's more than that. And we're seeing this growth in functional health products, or products that add value in terms of nutrition. So we're seeing that it's about the vitamins the French consumers consume as part of their meals, and that's where fish and seafood can play a really interesting role. We're also seeing that products that demonstrate those nutritional benefits are doing well in the French market, and one of the ways that the French consumers look to manage their diet is the Nutri-Score system. This is a system of scoring every product in terms of health attributes, and it's something that is widely used across European markets. For example, it's used in Italy as well. We know that. Within France, there is a huge awareness of this, so nearly 100% really have seen and understand what the Nutri-Score system does, and we know that a lot of French consumers use it to help them maintain that healthy diet. So something like salmon can act as a really interesting and important health signpost with the Nutri-Score label. So we're going to drill down now a bit into fish and seafood in France, and just understand a little bit about French consumers and how they see the seafood market. So this first chart is a Kantar chart, and it's what Kantar call a KPI tree, or key performance indicator tree. And it looks at the performance of, you've got seafood on the top, and then you've got total fish at the bottom. And you can see that everything feeds into the value performance, which is the orange tab at the top of these trees, if you like. And the pattern that we're seeing, so the categories worth about the total seafood category is worth about 8.4 billion, and in fish is about 6.3 billion. And the trend that's behind this at a total headline level is we're seeing rising prices. You can see that on at the top right there, impacting frequency at a headline level, and also probably volume per buyer, so that's down slightly, and that's driven partly by patterns around fish and seafood. And it's still an important part of the market, and we'll see that. So it's not massive declines, but obviously price and the uncertainty in the market is affecting most protein categories out there. Drilling down, this is Kantar's read of the top 10 fish and seafood species in France, and you've got a volume in millions of euros on the left, and then you've got value in millions of euros, excuse that, and then volume in tons on the right. And this is a 52-week picture to April this year versus the previous year. So some of the key headlines you can see on here is, firstly, the biggest fish species is salmon, and it's showing really strong growth, value and volume growth. And some of the things behind that include the French love salmon, and they recognize that it's a healthy product, it's delicious. A lot of that comes from the Norwegian sea markets, and you know, it's appreciated by French consumers. We're also seeing prawns do well, the likes of trout. Interestingly, with trout, what we're seeing is smoked trout is doing very well. So salmon is seen as the kind of the nice dish to have as a treat at the weekend. Trout is more of a weekly favorite with French consumers. And we're also seeing scallops doing well, and that's partly down to the younger consumers and sort of performance on coastlines in France. The species which are probably dragging down performance slightly are tuna, and that can be specifically linked to a European-wide challenge with the tuna manufacturers around mercury content, and that's had a massive impact in France, and that's why that particular species is down. And then we're seeing a little decline in cod. That's probably linked to price rises, but also availability in terms of quotas and the amount of cod that's available in the marketplace. And so we are seeing some switching into some of the cheaper species as well. So we talked about taste and quality for food and drink with French consumers. So what's important around seafood? Well, one thing we know, so this is some qual research that was done by IFARB, and it's quite interesting. What we firstly probably stating the obvious is 3/4 of French consumers think their local fishmonger delivers the best quality, and that's something that's really important to French consumers. We know that knowledge is good in cooking around and in how to cook seafood is strong in France, with only 12% thinking it's a barrier, particularly with older clients or older, shoppers and consumers in the French market. They are particularly strong when it comes to cooking and cooking seafood. We've spoken about price rises and that barrier impacting some species, so we do know that that is a challenge. But what's really important to French consumers is around 60% of French consumers see origin as vital. So that's the heritage. Yes, they appreciate products which come from France, but if you can demonstrate as a producer the quality, the provenance of the products you deliver, so from the fantastic fjords of Norway, for example, then French consumers will appreciate that and they will vote with their pockets. So in terms of where seafood sales go through, so this is Kantar's read of sales by channel on the right there for 2024, and you can see that around 72% of sales go through the big supermarkets. So that's hypermarché, supermarché, and the discounters. And when we talk about discounters, we don't just mean the traditional Euro discounters like Aldi and Lidl, but we also know that the French frozen specialists that probably fit under that banner are also doing well. A further 16% goes through those more traditional avenues, such as fishmongers and sort of local stores within sort of villages and towns. And we know that the rest goes through online and even smaller stores. But really, the important thing to realise about the French and seafood consumption, Kantar puts penetration at over 87%. So 87% in a given year of French consumers will eat fish and seafood. And they do that on average 7.6 times over a 52-week period. So that's averaging every consumer in France and the amount of seafood consumed. So you can see that it's vital and a really key part of the whole French food and drink industry. We're going to drill down into a couple of important species now. So saithe, we know that in 2022, around 88% of saithe products came from Norwegian waters, and actually in the market overall it's got a 30% penetration, so 30% of French consumers consume saithe. And if you look at those that consume regularly, a third of those eat it at least once a month. So saithe as a subspecies, if you like, is really important in France. And we know the category is worth about 122 million and does about 9,500 tons. Down slightly, again linked to price, but it's still, if you go back to that penetration number as called out by Kantar, so this is Kantar data again, there's still almost a third of French consumers regularly eat the sort of this species in France. If we move on to another subspecies, Scrae, this is a species which has a slightly different positioning. So the restaurant trade is fully aware of this species, and it's loved by chefs. It's sought after by chefs. The season starts in November and goes right the way through to spring the following year. What we are seeing in the sort of retail world, so the at-home consumption is probably down a little bit. Prices are rising and impacting that, but it's also probably stand out at point of purchase. So in French supermarkets, it's probably not called out as much enough by producers in that market, and that's having an impact on numbers purchased. But what we do expect is that the French restaurant trade will continue to champion this species because it is really loved, and the high quality, that sort of gourmet taste of the Scrae flesh is really appeals to those that eat in restaurants in France, and chefs recognize that, and they have recognized that. So if you are focusing, you're a producer focusing on Scrae, then the out-of-home market restaurants, particularly high-end restaurants, are really where you need to think about how you can make those chefs' lives easier and how you can create products specifically for those channels. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about sushi and the sushi and surimi market in France, which in 2023, according to Kakana, was worth about 152 million euros. And we know that around 15% of French households regularly consume sushi and surimi, and this over-indexes actually in younger French consumers, particularly around the 18 to 25-year-olds. In the last couple of years, it's probably the volume has probably drifted a little bit, and that's partly because higher costs. It's a theme that we've been seeing all the way through this presentation, and also perhaps a lack of innovation. But however, conversely, we're seeing a growth in Asian foods. And again, this is another European-wide trend. In France in 2023, the Asian foods market was around about 440 million. And what we're seeing is other Asian products come into the market. So the likes of ramen, noodles, bao buns, that kind of thing. So if you're a producer that specializes in Asian products or is targeting this category, think about that in terms of moving the sushi surimi category into those sort of areas, as that is starting to gain traction, particularly with younger French consumers. We're going to move on to out of home now and talk a little bit about that over the next few slides. So in 2023, data that came from the French government, the ANSSI, their statistical department, sort of categorized restaurant types in France into two main areas. The traditional French restaurant, probably in most towns and villages, over 100,000 or less, even in some cases, run by perhaps a middle-aged Frenchman. That forms a massive part of the French market, so 77%. And then you've got the newer fast food trend that forms around 23%. Those guys or those restaurant types are setting up in different locations, in cheaper regions, in towns and cities, or on the edge of towns and cities. Those, while still a small part of the market, in 2023, 62% of new restaurants were fast or convenience food outlets. So traditional restaurants were perhaps slightly slower. Part of that's to do with pricing, again, the pressures under those more traditional restaurants. And again, thinking about those traditional restaurants and how you can support them is really important in the French out-of-home market. So seafood in restaurants in 2021 was worth about 1.5 billion euros in France, and most of the products, around 3/4, were fresh. There was a pressure, and has been ever since, on pricing in that area. So we're starting to see fish products perhaps from outside France where pricing has gone up, especially around salmon. We know salmon's performing well, and to some extent cod come into these sort of more traditional restaurants. What we have seen is perhaps a change in behavior from French consumers. So we talked about that uncertainty in the French economy. We talked about French shoppers' pockets being hit and perhaps trying to manage spend and even go out less in some cases. What we have seen, those that do go out are probably curtailing their spend. And instead of having that traditional whole meal from a starter to a main to a dessert and drinks on the side, which is, synonymous with France and how French consumers eat and drink. What we're seeing is perhaps less of those side dishes, so less starters, less desserts, perhaps even a few less drinks. And also what we're seeing is restaurants are trying to put cheaper species on the menu. So things like John Dory and turbot, which are perhaps a bit more expensive, are being changed for the likes of cod and scallops, which we know are doing well, and pollock as well. I'm now going to hand over to Lars, who is going to who's our consumer insights expert, and is going to pick up on some brilliant consumer insight behavior on France and give you some more information around that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Hi, and welcome to this snapshot of a snapshot report on consumer behavior in the French market. My name is Lars Moxnes. I am a consumer insight specialist within the Norwegian Seafood Council. I am a social psychologist with a PhD in marketing, consumer behavior, and I'm now on my 7th year with the Norwegian Seafood Council. So my job is to maintain and structure these service that we run in our most important markets around the world. Typically, we do this among seafood consumers, which means that we include people who eat seafood at least, more often than every third month. So what we're going to talk a little bit about now are some attitudes and behavior connected with fish and seafood for French consumers, some of the barriers that they have for not consuming seafood. Like I said, typically we screen out people who have a lower seafood consumption every third month. But in last year's report, we wanted to gain some more insights in why people are choosing not to eat seafood as often. And given the time that we're living in and rising costs and everything being more expensive, perhaps not surprisingly, the fact that it's too expensive comes up as the highest barrier. Also, people just don't have it as a part of their diet, some of them, and it doesn't appeal to them taste-wise. But they are eating a lot of seafood still. 63% eat fish and seafood once a week at least. Most of it is at home, some of it out of home, and even as takeout. People are also feeling the pinch of rising costs. They eat less often at restaurants, and they have more of these meal occasions at home to manage these increasing costs. Although only 11% are eating or buying cheaper alternatives. We also do a segmentation of our consumers, which means that it's a quite straightforward segmentation. We found that the frequency of which they consume seafood or any fish species correlates with other aspects as well, particularly demographics like income and education. So when we write here heavy consumers of fish and seafood, they are the ones that eat seafood species or fish more often than once a week. And they are doing also a lot of price matching. They are, to some extent, reducing the volume. And they are also paying attention to when things are on promotion. They still want to pay more for fish and seafood that are sustainable, and they also try to buy some products with recyclable packaging. Quality is important, and we also asked them about some behaviors and attitudes that they are least willing to accept that companies or producers do when it comes to managing the rising costs. They are not willing to accept that brands reduce the quality of ingredients to bring prices down. Although they find that it's okay for brands to increase prices given that they also face rising costs. So moving on to salmon, and French consumers do love salmon. 77% of our seafood consumers, they eat it at least once a month. And we also wanted to know the preparation type that people are using when they're making their salmon at home. So here in France, they are searing and browning. That's the favorite, followed by dry heat cooking, such as grilling, and then raw preparation, such as sushi and poke bowl comes down in third place. And somewhat more favorable by women. Although people do like their fresh salmon, this also a little bit more popular in the middle-age group, 35 to 49. There's still a high percentage that do like smoked salmon, and 18% that also use frozen, but fresh reigns supreme. Now, when it comes to who they're eating their salmon with at home, it's typically with their families or partners. Again, here the middle-aged group are over-indexing. People do eat salmon because they seek a sense of enjoyment. They see it as part of maintaining a healthy diet, and that they want something that everybody can enjoy. People do buy a mix of products, both branded as well as unbranded products, or private label brands, which means the store's own brand. And some, almost half of them, with a third of them mainly or exclusively buying brands. So Norway is a strong country of origin for Finnish consumers when it comes to salmon, followed by Scotland. But we'll do see a slightly different image when it comes to cod. So cod is also a popular fish with the French consumers. Many are buying fresh and eating healthy, being part of the decision whether to do it. But as we can see here, the knowledge of Norway as a country of origin has some room to grow. French consumers believe, although there's not much French cod in the market, that cod is French. They eat, roughly a third eat it once a week or more often, and almost 85% eat it at least once a month. Again, fresh is important. Most people prefer fresh cod, also buying to some extent frozen. Only 6% they used processed or a prepared ready-made meals when it comes to cod. It's also connected with relaxing and doing nothing special. It's a home meal. It's seen as an everyday fish. Health being a very strong driver. Almost half say they want to, or they eat cod because they want to maintain a healthy diet. 41% are seeking a sense of enjoyment from the food. So most people also plan their purchases of cod at home, which means they plan both the species they want to buy, that they want to buy cod, and they also plan the product type. Quality is important, slightly above also the price focus and the range and availability of products in the store as well. So from one of our other studies that we run in most important markets around the world, from our tracking report, this typically is run twice a year. Now, for this report, the former being more of an in-depth, trying to understand the consumers in depth. This is more of a tracking that follows our main brand KPIs for Norwegian seafood and seafood products. So we measure consumption frequency here. We measure awareness. We measure usage. We measure brand strength. And we do this among always representative samples in the age group 20 to 65 years old. And as I mentioned previously, we typically screen out people who are eating less frequently. From the last report that was conducted in November, and we do have now recently received the first wave of 2025 in, but it's not been published yet. So French consumers, a lot of them eat a lot of fish at least once a week, close to 70%. Norway is a strong country of origin when it comes to salmon, although we do have room to grow when it comes to educating French consumers about the origins of cod and how that connected with the Norwegian origin. When it comes to saithe, top of mind there, not as strong as salmon, obviously, but still some recognition and awareness to the Norwegian origin of saithe. 18% when it comes to top of mind for skrei. So when it comes to the image, the logo, roughly a third say that they have seen the logo, and Norway also features in the top 5 preferred countries when buying all these different species. A new addition I might add from this year's tracker is that we have included an extra question that we pose to people who have positive logo recognition about where they have seen the logo. So that will be published in a little bit. So logo recognitions a little bit up since January 2021. It fluctuates a little bit. Typically, that it's connected to campaign activities in the market. Again, we see a picture when it comes to SAIS that there's some room to grow for the Norwegian origin and the awareness there, France being in the topmost position. But Norway, though, has the first place when it comes to Skrei. So there's some positive connections there with the Norwegian origin and Skrei. Salmon, strongest for Norway, closely followed by Scotland, and even some people do prefer French salmon. So a breakdown of the frequency of the different species. People do eat quite frequently, although we can see there that not a lot of them are increasing their consumption relative to 6 months previous. Some are even eating a little bit less. Although perhaps the biggest uncertainty there is connected with their Skrei consumption. Likely because the last time this was asked, it was almost not out of season yet. The season hasn't started yet. So in summary, what are the opportunities for the category in seafood in France? So you have 5 key points here: convenience, effective targeting, on-the-go snacks, traditional retailing, and health. So there's an opportunity to develop more convenient formats. Roughly a quarter are looking for quick, ready-to-eat options and to spend minimal time cooking them. Like seafood-based ready meals or snacks, products sold in supermarket delicatessen areas to meet this demand for convenience in the French market. Now, there's also a possibility to tailor seafood offerings by age group, tapping into, for instance, the 65+ area. There's also opportunities here in targeting based on segments within these age categories. To promote also fish species like SAIS. Younger consumers, though, they might be drawn to more quick service dining, and they can also be a strong target for ready-to-eat products, including also prawns and smoked salmon. So seafood-based on-the-go snacks, they could be a pretty strong, or it could have a pretty strong potential in France, where you have the busy lifestyles demanding perhaps that you can get tasty and healthy food on the go. There's also an opportunity to support traditional retailers like fishmongers by developing products that celebrate the appeal of French home cooking. Again, here, ready-to-cook seafood dishes inspired by regional recipes could be a key here. Health, again, is a powerful purchase driver, both in France as well as in other countries. And here is an opportunity for Norwegian seafood producers to effectively promote the nutritional benefits of species like salmon and cod, and also the other Norwegian exports. So key here be to position them as a natural, wholesome, and a healthy option, especially then to to fit into rising trends like flexitarianism, clean label eating, and life balance meals. So some of the opportunities that are potential in France. So this was just a snapshot of a snapshot. So for more consumer and insights about the French market, you should be able to access the report shortly. Now I'll just hand over to Sigrid to let her wrap this webinar up. Thank you.
Thanks a lot to David and Lars, and thank you for joining us today. I hope you found the session useful. And if you want to have a look at the report, you can find it at seafood.no/en. And if you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact me by email or call me. You find my contact information also on our website. So then I wish you all a good day and see you soon.